Welcome. What is your name?
My name is Damion Mendez.
Thank you for being here, Damion. Would there ever be a time that you would be upset if someone asked what pronouns you use?
No,
What pronouns do you accept or use?
I accept he, him, and they, them.
All right. How long have you been using those pronouns?
I would say for about a year now, actually. Specifically they, them.
Are there specific times or places that you would prefer certain pronouns?
No, I think anytime, anywhere, that's totally fine.
So today, if I were to refer to you as using they them pronouns or he him pronouns, both are okay.
Yes.
And if you go out on Saturday night, is there ever a time that it switches between those, or you accept all of those pronouns?
I accept all of them. They don't really change necessarily.
Okay. I think you're actually one of the first to accept both of those pronouns and be okay at all times with both pronouns. Can you tell me a little bit more about your journey to starting to use those pronouns?
Absolutely.
And if you can, start with your childhood.
Yeah.
And just tell me when you might have first started questioning gender.
Yeah. So since I can remember, I've always questioned gender, but I didn't necessarily understand that there was a difference between men and women or boys and girls. I always thought of myself as a boy, but people told me that I was a girl. And eventually when I got into high school, I tried really hard to conform. I was very feminine. I did everything I could to be the girly girl that I was expected to be. And then I met a trans person at an event, and literally that day I told my parents I was trans. I knew that although at the time identified as a lesbian, that wasn't who I really was. And immediately I took on he, him pronouns for the first half of my transition. So I've been in transition for 10 years. And in the beginning, I was very masculine. I would only accept he, him. I would be upset if people asked me what my pronouns were. And I didn't want to be seen as that person that I think that I was running from. In the past year, I've really thought about all of my mannerisms, my characteristics, who I am, and have come to the realization that I identify as more fluid or trans masculine with a feminine feel. I have accepted that, and I believe that by taking on both he, him, and they, them, and accepting both at any time, that really encompasses who I am.
How much responsibility do you think should be put on others to ask your pronouns, or for you to tell others?
Maybe that has more to do with where you are. So if you're in a space where people are aware of these kinds of things, I think it's everyone's responsibility to ask anyone's pronouns, because if we make assumptions, we are making assumptions, and that is incorrect, because you can look however you want, you can talk however you want, you can do all sorts of things, and those pronouns might not necessarily match what people are perceiving you as. In spaces where people don't know, and maybe that's a boardroom meeting, or you're at a community event, and you feel safe, and safety is important. And so if you feel safe to do so, I think that for myself, I wouldn't place this on others, but for myself, I feel that there is a responsibility to kind of remind people that you are making assumptions, and you would be really surprised once you met me, who I am and how I identify.
Your name. How long have you gone by Damion?
So I have gone by Damion for the past 2 years. Prior to that, I went by a name that was more closely related to my my given name. Because I was adopted, I have a birth name and a given name. Then I changed my name again, and then I changed my name one more time. And Damion really represents me not only as with a masculine name, but also a name that represents my heritage. I chose to take a name that would be found in Colombia. And so my first name is Damion, my middle name is Melina, and my last name is Mendez. And Melina and Mendez are actually my birth name. So that's where that all comes from.
Okay. Do you feel that race plays into gender identity and acceptance of someone's gender?
Interesting. How do I do this quickly? Okay. So there is a lot of people that I know in my life, both who identify as white and who identify as people of color, indigenous, that have very intense feelings about this. And I understand why. From a perspective of a person of color, I believe that is not true. I believe that people of color are perceived to be more judgmental around things like gender and sexual orientation. But that has to be unpacked, knowing the history of this country and knowing the history of how race started in America, and knowing that colonization plays a very large part in how race is seen and how gender is seen. We have to take that into account. If we look at indigenous and native communities, they very much identify, and not just in America, identify as gender fluidity. You have things like two-spirit identities and such. And those people, when colonizers came to America and other spaces, they were robbed of their traditions. They were actually probably most likely murdered, and their histories were erased. And so historically, that's not true. Presently, it may seem that way, but I think that, again, racism plays into those understandings and those maybe like microaggressions or like small experiences, but there is a deeper story to what we see on a day-to-day basis.
If you had to list 10 things in your life that you think about the most or that might be the most important to you, where would your gender identity fit in? 10 would be the absolute most important thing, the thing you think about the most.
Oh my goodness. So I think I'm gonna be weird about this and just be like, it would be 10 and a half or 9.5. Yes, 9.5, because race and gender for me, and sexuality, I guess, because those three things, they just really merge for me. I have a very intersectional identity and understanding, and so it would be right there, and I couldn't tell you. It would depend on what we were talking about as to which would be in front, gender or race, but they are so closely tied.
Can you tell me the difference, or if there's a difference, between gender nonconforming, gender non-binary, gender neutral, and transgender? And also, if you have other labels that you can throw out there, I want people to hear these words.
Okay, so short answer, yes and no. It's going to depend on the person. I know people who identify as trans and gender nonconforming. I identify as trans and gender nonconforming, or I like the word gender diverse, which is kind of getting more talked about, because non-conforming kind of puts this like negative or like othering on that identity, and so like diverse just means that people identify in very different ways. I've also heard gender creative, gender fluid, just like non-binary. Like there's lots of different labels, and I think that the reason why there's so many different labels is because people get to self-identify.
Where did you say that you were born?
Colombia, which is in South America.
Do you speak Spanish?
A little bit.
Okay. Have you heard the term Latinx?
Yes.
So can you tell me if you would refer to yourself in that way, or how it might relate to you?
Yes, I do identify as Latinx, and that also is about a year into that identity. I think that it goes along with wanting there to be an understanding that not everyone identifies as male or female. That with all of that colonization stuff, that did affect the Spanish language, and now people are trying to just bring a wider understanding of how people identify.
What message or advice might you have for youth or for parents who have children who are questioning their gender identity?
I'm going to go with parents because I think people tend to forget about their experience. And parents can be, doesn't have to be biological, doesn't even have to be, mom, dad. It could be people who are taking care of young folks. I think that it's important to, give the young person in your life autonomy and the ability to self-identify. And yes, always love them and be concerned about their safety, but also know that community is really important, and once somebody finds a really solid community, they tend to thrive. Obviously, there's other aspects of thriving, but community is really, really important. And so, getting your young person hooked up with community, and then also finding a community for yourself to make sure that you're not experiencing all of these different changes and almost your own transitions by yourself, reading books, getting into parent groups, online groups, all sorts of different options out there for parents, just to be aware of what's going on and have support along with the young people that they have in their life.
Is there anything else you would like to say to the people listening or to the community?
I think that people who use multiple pronouns or one pronoun, give them the ability to have that. People do make mistakes, right? I make mistakes sometimes. And all we have to do is just really quickly apologize and move forward. And, just remember that those people identify that way, and giving them that respect means so much more than you'll probably ever know. Because when you aren't seen in the world, and then people start to see who you are, it makes people feel so much more inside their own bodies. Yeah.